All right, hello everybody. Welcome back. Good to see you guys. I see we got a solid group already. There's still a few minutes until it's class time, about 3 minutes. So for now, just I guess get comfortable. Hope you guys had a great weekend. Some people probably enjoying the return of football and all of that. Hi Adeline, good to see you. Appreciate everyone being here at the meeting and your just general attendance and participation and good cheer. So that's all good. Good afternoon, guys. How's my weekend? It was good. You know, with the air quality, it wasn't ideal for my running routine that I like to stick with. So I actually took a couple days off, which sounds like not a big deal, but I was on a real streak. Like throughout the whole summer, I was running every day for like 101 days. It was my personal best streak. And just with last week with the fires and stuff, yeah, took 3 days off. So that was a little boring, but I got a lot of time to rest, relax, prepare for my classes, and just kind of get some good meals and other things. So it was nice. Always nice to have the time off. And good afternoon to everybody else here. Good to see everyone. Feel free, like always, you know, throw in any comments, questions, greetings, whatever you like in the chat. Good afternoon there. My cats are running around, just doing all kinds of stuff. Draw myself? No, that's no way. I have just too much of a generic appearance. I mean, it's like nothing distinctive to draw. Okay. So about 45 seconds left. We'll get going. The glasses. I mean, you know, glasses, they're just, there's really nothing to them. They're kind of thick frames. You can see what they look like. Yeah, they're kind of a little angled at the bottom, right? So, man, this is going to suck. That's about as good as it's ever going to get talking about artwork from me. So enjoy while it lasts. We had it for a minute, didn't we? All right. Well, guys, good afternoon. Welcome back, everyone. Hope you had a great weekend. So yeah, today it's Monday the 14th of September, and I'm sure everybody knows and understands that the first homework assignments were due today. So if you didn't already, please, without any delay, send me your assignment. It's due today, and it would receive a little bit of a late deduction of credit with each increasing day of it being late. So my goal is to review the material on Thursday. Sorry, Wednesday's our next meeting. On Wednesday at the next meeting. So by that point, I'm not going to accept any further submissions because the answers will just be all out there. But at any rate, you know, most of you, I think, have already submitted it. I've acknowledged the receipt of a lot of them as of today, and I'm going to continue to go over what's in my inbox to let everyone know who submitted it, that I got it. So no later than, you know, tomorrow morning at the latest, if you have sent me your assignment, you're going to get my confirmation that I received it. The next thing then that we look forward to is next week on Monday, when we have got the first quiz of the class. So the first quiz in this class deals with Chapter 8 and Chapter 1. Chapter 8 is all that stuff we've covered about deduction, induction, what is validity, what is soundness, what are the forms of hypothetical syllogism, disjunctive syllogism. So that stuff is Chapter 8. And then Chapter 1 is all the things that we're covering in the last few meetings. So we talked about the social psychology experiments, the Zimbardo study and the Milgram study. And then we talked a little bit about the 3 stages of cognitive development, and there's more to go in Chapter 1. So today the goal is to cover more of the Chapter 1 material, see if we can get through as much of it as possible. And then, you know, next class we'll go over our homework assignments. I'll give you guys the answer key. Everyone will know how they did on that assignment. And then you have your quiz. That's next Monday. Okay, so hopefully everyone's on the same page with me. Let me know if there's anything that I need to clarify or something that I left out. Yeah, back to chapter 1 then. So the initial couple things within, we get a study guide for the quiz. Yeah, so I wasn't going to give a formal study guide, but I am going to talk about the topics that could be used on the quiz in the Wednesday meeting. So we will for sure cover the general topics, and I'll give you guys all a clear sense of what could be asked. But if you've been reading the textbook, following the lectures, taking good notes, none of it's going to be a big surprise. It's just terms and concepts that we've defined and that we've given examples of so far. Okay, a good question. Yeah, so to chapter 1. It opened with those description of those two important social psychology experiments, Milgram and Zimbardo. Flavio, good question. Is it the whole test period? Yes, you'll get the whole class period to do your quiz. I'll mail to everyone in the class the test form, and you'll get it right around the beginning of class time, maybe a few minutes before. And then I'm going to give you basically like a 90-minute window to complete the test form and send it back to me as an attachment. So yeah, that's the format. Thank you. Anyway, Milgram was the shock experiment that was testing obedience. No, you'll be on your own for that, but I may change my mind. Maybe I'll have it be on Zoom. Let me think about it, but you'll definitely have to send in the same test form, whether it's on Zoom or on your own. I'll give you the update on Wednesday on that. That's a good question. I was thinking of, well, I'm of two minds on that question, so I'll get back to you as I consider it over the next day. Okay. Milgram was the shock experiment one. Zimbardo was the Stanford prison experiment. They both demonstrate that when you think critically, you're less susceptible to just doing things mindlessly, and especially in situations where you have some power and control over other people, and you could even make decisions that involve them in harm or whatever. So in the case of Milgram, the better critical thinkers, the minority or so of 33%, were capable of providing sound reasons and cogent arguments as to why they should stop. And in the case of the Zimbardo study, it showed that once people are given a grant of authority, loose supervision, and a sort of role to play, people can sometimes get out of control and get carried away with the way they're carrying themselves and conducting that role. And good critical thinking seems to be the antidote to either way of misbehaving. So we learned about those studies. We talked about the 3 stages of cognitive development: dualism. Dualism when the person thinks that truth is all just black and white and authority figures know all the answers, so you just listen to them and you don't think for yourself. The second phase is relativism, where you believe that truth is just all personal opinion, and since opinions should all be looked at as equal, none should judge the other opinions. The final level would be commitment, where you're basically now going to commit to your own views based on reason and the best available evidence. And that's the highest level because it still holds the idea that there's objective truth. But like the person at this commitment stage doesn't just feel that everyone else, smart authority figures or whoever, possess the answers to all of the important questions. So we covered that stuff. Now we're going to continue to go through chapter 1 by talking a little bit about what are some of the good qualities that critical thinkers usually have. So what are the qualities of a good critical thinker? By the way, Jamie, I see your question here. Could someone type the test information? Yes. A person could easily, and probably many of you will, or even prefer, to use a word processor and just submit the typed version of your quiz. Yes, that'll be fine. But I'm also happy to accept a handwritten version if it's properly scanned to me. So I give you all the options. Okay. So yeah, now we're going to discuss qualities of good critical thinkers. Okay, so we want to be better critical thinkers. We want to improve on this scale in some way if we can. One way to do that is to try and emulate the qualities that we see typically within the good critical thinkers of the world. So the textbook in chapter 1 mentions a whole host of attributes, qualities, features that good critical thinkers usually do have. And by trying to instill these same attributes within ourselves, we make progress towards being better critical thinkers. So what's the sort of blueprint or the general description of the good critical thinker? So we got a whole bunch of vocabulary terms to put here. Yeah, I like Flavio, like I have said. We're going to discuss the quiz in a little more detail on Wednesday, but it's just a chapter 8 and chapter 1. So it's like on this stuff that we're learning among other topics, including the chapter 8 topics. So one quality that good critical thinkers typically do have is just analytical skills. That's mentioned right at the top. So it's simply defined as the ability to provide logical support for your beliefs instead of just having unfounded opinions. Little Eddie. Hey, Eddie. Sorry, boy. Big boy. Let me let you down. Okay. Cool. So here's the definition, and I'll describe and discuss it a little bit in more depth. So analytical skills, the ability to provide logical support for your beliefs instead of just having unfounded, unjustified, baseless opinions. So good critical thinkers have beliefs like we all do, but they don't just say things that they can't back up or that they can't defend with some type of solid reasons or argument. We know that because that's kind of where the class started, defining what is a good critical thinker. So this can be seen in some way as a quality, an attribute, a habit of mind. A good critical thinker is in the habit of always making sure that they have the receipts, as it were, that can defend any claims that they make, so that they can make some evidentially compelling argument towards the conclusion of what they believe. So if you ask a critical thinker, why do you believe that? They won't just shrug their shoulders and be like, I don't know, I have no real idea, it's just how I feel. They'll give you a reasoned argument that is always the basis of their belief. Okay, so one thing is good analytical skills. You have beliefs, but you've analyzed the reasons why, and you're ready to give those reasons in case you're ever challenged to justify or to defend the belief. So that's one. Next up, we've got effective communication. So effective communication, another quality that is usually seen in a good critical thinker, it's simply the ability to listen, speak, and write well, and also having awareness of different communication styles. So speaking, writing, and listening well and being aware of different communication styles. Effective communication. All right, so as human beings that we are, we deal in language and information. So we got to communicate. And a lot of times, the quality of how good you are as a communicator can make a big difference to getting to the kind of results that you want in life. And it's never been to anybody's disadvantage to be a little bit better of a communicator, a little bit better at writing, speaking, and the ability to listen to the other party, since every communication is a two-way street where both parties are engaged and exchanging ideas. So it can come in handy in ever so many different areas of human life, right? You're always going to be benefited by being a better communicator for perhaps the sake of discussing matters with employers, your professors, members of your community, parents, teachers, friends, when you're writing emails, when you're speaking in class, when you're giving presentations. when you're trying to publish materials in some type of research forum. So it's always to our benefit to be a little bit more clear in the way we express our thoughts, either in writing, which is one mode of communication, or in speech, which is obviously another. And then the third element there is just listening. Of course, when you're a communicator, it's not just you dictating to people and talking at them, but hearing what they have to say so that you can form a coherent and reasonable response. So good communicators don't just have the ability to speak and write very well. Together with that, they also listen carefully and take measure of what the other person's saying. So you want to be a good communicator, and then the last little part is knowing about different communication styles. So a lot of times in life, you have to be flexible with how you communicate, meaning that you have to adapt to the circumstance that you're in to get the most productive outcome. So like the way that I talk to you guys as a teacher, as a professor, it's very pedantic a lot of times. It's like trying to be discursive, precise, clear, formal even at times. Now, the way I would talk to my friends or, people that I hang out with and know on a casual basis is way different. So what would be appropriate to the context of a conversational exchange with a friend is not exactly the same mode of speech or behavior that would be appropriate in a different academic setting. So you sometimes need to be able to modify or code switch, as they say, depending on the circumstances you are in. A more professional, more scholarly, more academic, more casual, it just depends on the case. So good communicators know how to adapt. They are chameleon-like in that way, being capable of making the right type of linguistic gesture or exchange to fit the needs of the situation. You say the word code switching, I just mentioned it in passing, Melissa, because I don't want it to seem as though I'm merely referring to that. Code switching is sometimes a term that is used to distinguish between when you're talking very informally or in a vernacular sense versus in a kind of professional or academic setting. But that's only one of these cases, so I don't want to collapse the definition into merely code switching. But let us put it this way: awareness of different styles of communication. In some cases, that'll cause you to elevate. In some cases, it might cause you to come to a less formal level of discussion. So we got to be alert and aware as we communicate to do it effectively. Next up, research and inquiry skills. So that's just the ability to gather, evaluate, and put together evidence for the purposes of research. So research or inquiries of taking out information on a research topic. Now, if there's anything in the world right now that you're interested in that you don't know about yet, how are you going to learn about it? Well, you're not going to be able to just sit back in a chair and dream up the facts. You have to go out into the world, investigate, and figure out the information on that topic. So like if I want to know about, I don't know, the history of different dynasties in a particular time period in China that I don't know about right now, I'm going to have to go out into the world, read books, go on the internet, consult with scholarly sources to get that information into my mind so that now I'm informed about it. Now, research is something that we sometimes do in an academic setting as students or as professors or scholars. Sometimes we're just doing it on our own for the sake of our own interests or intellectual pursuit. But we would never know anything if we didn't go out in search of information to become better informed. So research and inquiry is a huge part of just the human condition and, of course, part of being a good critical thinker. And then what it involves is knowing how to gather the information, knowing how to organize and distinguish true from false claims, knowing where reliable sources are to look for, being able to evaluate them for their credibility, and put them together for a body of research. So being a good researcher comes along with being a good critical thinker, and of course, that benefits you across the board, whether it be in school, within your profession, or just in your personal life. Okay, so research skills. Then we've got flexibility. Now, flexibility, as the textbook discusses it, we're not talking about literal like flexibility, like yoga or whatever, but even, I mean, that is important, I guess, to have a little bit of flexibility if you can. But we're talking about intellectual or mental flexibility. So, meaning the ability to evaluate and be open-minded to conflicting views, okay? But also being capable of changing your mind or plans. All right. And being able to change one's mind or plans. Okay, so flexibility, intellectual flexibility involves this basic concept. Let me explain it maybe starting at the bottom here. So a flexible-minded person is the sort of person who is not so stubbornly insistent on doubling down on their initial thought or course of action. All right, so if you are flexible of mind, then you're willing to have a course correction, basically, when you recognize that your initial belief perhaps is incorrect or your initial plan is failing. A flexible person says, okay, well, you know, I thought that that was correct, or I thought I had the right idea, but now I got to reconsider and reassess, reevaluate. I'm open-minded enough to be flexible in my approach, and sometimes that requires course correction. Now, the second element is being open-minded to conflicting views, to different viewpoints and perspectives. The flexible person doesn't just say, hey, I already know everything, so whatever you're saying to me, if it's to the contrary, I'm just going to throw it out and dismiss it. People who are flexible intellectually at least hear people out, even when the people are saying and arguing for things that they don't, you know, happen to believe, or at least don't initially believe. You want to always be open-minded and willing to consider a variety of viewpoints. It does not mean that you're going to necessarily change your mind, just that you're at least willing to hear out another person's argument in a fair-minded and honest way. You know, so you got to hear people out, be willing to hear what they have to say, and don't just be so obsessed with winning arguments or defending your claims and positions that you're never willing to budge or open your mind to different possibilities. So good critical thinkers are flexible of mind. They're willing to hear all viewpoints. They don't just shut people down. And they're also capable of changing their mind or plan. Now, if you don't have this kind of flexibility, it's just the opposite. That's the kind of person who, when plan A doesn't work, they just double, triple, quadruple down on it. Even if it's not working out, they keep hoping that it's going to eventually show its merit. And so it's the kind of person who can't change their mind, can't change their plans. They're just so set in their ways. Of course, we all love being right, and we hate sometimes to reconsider ourselves. But the goal of a critical thinker is not just to protect your ego from the idea that you could have ever made mistakes, but to arrive at the correct conclusions in the end, however you get there. So we should welcome opportunities for reconsideration and rethinking things. Even if we end up reaffirming what we already believed, the challenge to our ideas is intellectually valuable for us. Okay? So flexibility is another one. And then, kind of building on that same type of theme, another quality that the good critical thinkers usually do have is open-minded skepticism. Open-minded skepticism, so what is this? This is the quality or the habit of mind of not being willing to believe something unless and until it can be proven somehow beyond a reasonable doubt. So if you have open-minded skepticism, the skeptical part is you're holding off on believing things, you're a little skeptical, a little doubtful, until there's a really high standard of proof to kind of justify that claim. Okay, so one will not believe something unless it can be proven beyond a reasonable doubt, not beyond all possibility of doubt, but at least beyond some reasonable doubt. But we got to also get the open-minded part in there. So this is kind of the skeptical part of the definition, that you're not going to just believe anything unless it can be proven beyond a good reasonable doubt. But also, maybe I'll put it instead of the word and, but, even though they're both conjunction words, because this implies there's contrast. But keeps an open mind keeps an open mind until then, until such proof beyond a reasonable doubt has been established. Okay, so if you are a good critical thinker, you're a little picky about what you believe because you don't want to believe things that are not based on really good, hardcore, solid evidence. So a critical thinker says, unless there's that type of evidence, if you're just claiming something to me but you got no proof, or you don't have good enough proof, I'm going to say I'm not so sure. I'm going to hold off on that. I'm not, the jury is out, as they say. I can't really make a commitment to believe in it without a better basis in proof. But at the same time, the open-minded skeptic is also open-minded. So they don't foreclose any possibilities or lines of inquiry. They keep an open mind to all the available positions until one of them can be verified with some kind of reasonable proof. So on the open-minded side of things, you're willing to hear all the different arguments. But on the skeptical side of things, you're not going to endorse any of them or accept them for yourself unless and until some come with the good enough evidence to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. If you have that type of evidence, now you'll conclude that that's the right thing to believe. In the absence of such, you'll just say, well, we're going to have to wait until better evidence arrives. Until then, I'm undecided, or I'm kind of just uncommitted on the question that we're debating here. Okay? So this ensures that the beliefs that do pass through your filter of skepticism are really well-based. And it also ensures that you're willing to solicit the opinions of different people because you don't foreclose or shut down prematurely. You don't prejudge the different views until you've evaluated them. But you await the best evidence before you conclude that that's right. Okay. So we're just continuing to go through this heading in the text. Qualities of a good critical thinker. They had a grab bag of cluster of little definitions of these terms, and so I'm just trying to walk you through each one and give you some helpful, hopefully a little helpful discussion of each one as we do. On the topic of skepticism, I wanted to make a mention of an important philosopher that's briefly touched on in the textbook as well. This kind of segues from the open-minded skepticism concept to this discussion of a famous philosopher in the history of the West. So who I'm mentioning right now is this man. His name is René Descartes. So this is of the 17th century for the most part. He was born in 1596, and he lived until 1650. Descartes, this is a French name, so there's a little difference from the English style of pronunciation. René Descartes, it's like a French name. But anyway, René Descartes. He wrote this book in 1641 called The Meditations. That's his classic work that he's most well known for, The Meditations from 1641. In fact, the full title of it is a little bit longer, but it's often just colloquially referred to as The Meditations. The full title is Meditations on First Philosophy. But anyway, Descartes' book, The Meditations, call it what you will, it came out in 1641. Now, in that book that he wrote at that time, he advances this principle, which is called the method of doubt. So I want to tell you guys about the method of doubt. Before I hit you with the definition and discuss it a little bit, let me give you some context here. So living in the time that he lived back then in the 1600s, some historians and scholars, philosophers, refer to that time period in history of the West as like the Age of Reason. So you got to kind of see the bigger historical framework. At that time in Western history, we started to emerge from the medieval period, and this closely follows the Enlightenment. So this is like post-Enlightenment, early modern Europe. They call it the Age of Reason because throughout much of the early Christian era, the church was so dominant and it was such an eminent institution that it kind of controlled a lot of aspects of a person's formal education. So there was no such thing as like liberal democracy, division of church and state. The church was woven together with the state, and functions of government, including education, would have been tied together with ecclesiastical lessons. And if you had been, let's say, a heretic or unorthodox from the perspective of the church, could have been persecuted. Anyway, that started to end later on in the tail end of the medieval period, like around 13th and 14th century. And we start to see, as the medieval period ends and the Renaissance begins, this major explosion of knowledge across almost all the areas of academic pursuit. So the list goes on, but I could just give you a few examples. Like Newton is starting to discover principles of physics that we still largely rely on today. And Leibniz and Newton are both creating the calculus, which is this entirely new mathematical system. Descartes himself was also a geometrician and a mathematician, and he helped develop the Cartesian coordinates that we learn about in the coordinate plane system in geometry. We're starting to learn at that time more about anatomy and about biology. We learned that the cell is the most fundamental unit of biological material. We're starting to learn by using newly invented telescopes how the planetary orbits work. Copernicus and Galileo just recently discovered it not long before this, that the Earth's not in the center of the universe, which previous generations of mankind in the West did believe because they thought God would have wanted us to be in the center. But using these telescopes, they were able to verify that, in fact, the sun's at the center and we and the other planets have an elliptical orbit around it. So, okay, all these major new revolutionary advances in science, in medicine, in art, in biology and physics and math, they're all kind of happening in a very short time frame. So they sometimes call this the Age of Reason. Now, Descartes recognizes as an intellectual leader of his time that that is happening, that we're in the Age of Reason. And he says in this book, The Meditations, I want to make sure that as we now embark on this, journey as human beings towards greater and greater knowledge, that we make it all on a very firm foundation. If you think of the structure of human knowledge as kind of like a metaphor of a building that we're building up, then this towering structure of human knowledge, we want to make sure it's locked down on an absolutely solid foundation below. Because if it's constructed upon weak, shifting quicksand, then it could later on collapse, and we have to withdraw all the beliefs that we formed. So he says, let's start this whole scientific and revolutionary time period in the West on the right foot and make sure that we have something at the bottom of our whole system of knowledge that's a totally firm, unshakable foundation. That means he's in the search for certainty. He wants to know what is totally certain, so much so that it could never, ever, ever be doubted. And he says to the reader of this book, The Meditations, once I find out what that certain thing is that can never be doubted, that's going to be the foundation stone that we're going to place below all of our knowledge, such that everything is rooted in that. Okay, so how do we find out this certainty that we are on a quest for in his book? He says there's a method to use to get there, and that's where the method of doubt comes in. So the method of doubt is Descartes' proposed tactic, method, strategy for determining what is certain and that could never be doubted. So let me explain then the definition of this method. So the method of doubt advises you to do this. It says, assume to be false anything that could even possibly be doubted. Okay? Assume to be false anything and everything that could possibly be doubted. Okay, hopefully it's easy to read. It just says method of doubt. Definition, assume to be false anything that could possibly be doubted. Now, by using this method, Descartes thinks that we will set aside all the beliefs that contain any degree of doubtfulness, and then the only thing that will be left over from that process of elimination will be the belief or beliefs that are totally certain and cannot be denied or doubted. I was one time, of course, a college student back at UCLA, and when I was over there, I took a class in Descartes, and I had a pretty good professor who offered me this explanation, so I'll pass it on to you. If you want to think about Descartes' method of doubt, here's a metaphor. Consider the case of someone like out at the grocery store, shopping for like an apple in the apple produce area. Now, if you ever have shopped for fruits or vegetables, which probably most of you have, you'll notice that sometimes there's better and worse specimen there in the big bin, right? Like some of them look nice and some of them look like they're not your number one pick if you're going to take one and put it in the bag, right? So imagine that you're trying to find an apple in that big cart, but you're not just trying to find any basic apple. You're trying to find the one that's like perfect and just an ideal specimen. Maybe you're going to give this apple to one of your professors as a nice gift. Well, I guess not anymore with COVID, but back in the day they used to do that. So whatever the case is, you want an apple. You want it to be a perfect, pristine specimen. So you go over to the cart, you pull out an apple, and you're like, this one looks pretty good. And it does. But the thing is, you turn it around and you examine it a little more, and you notice, not perfect. Here, there's just this one little mark over here. There's a little bruise or a little divot. So although it was close, not the one I'm looking for, I need that perfect, pristine example. So you set it over to the side, and it's on to the next. And you just keep going through the cart until you get to that one unblemished, perfectly round and smooth example of an apple. And you're like, okay, I got it. Now, that's a metaphor. In the real case of the method of doubt, we're not, picking out apples from a barrel, but we are going through the beliefs in our belief system. And the equivalent of this in the case of the method of doubt would be expose a belief that is in your belief system to the light of doubt and scrutiny. And if there's any possible case or even very far removed, far-fetched reason to think it could be false, then that means it's not absolutely certain. It has that little degree of doubt that's capable. So put it to the side, assume it is false, and keep going on and on to the next until you get to some belief there that cannot be doubted at all. Okay, so that's how Descartes thought we'll discover what certainty is. We'll discover what is certain by using the method of doubt to eliminate and set aside, at least temporarily, all the other beliefs that could be doubted. So by setting them aside, we will expose what's left over as the only things that could possibly be certain. Now, we probably in our everyday lives would not take the method of doubt to the far extremes of doubt that Descartes himself did. I understand what you're saying, Miguel. It sounds very pessimistic at first, and I kind of feel that in a way, because look, in his method of doubt, almost everything can be doubted. In fact, at first it looks like almost everything can, and there's only one thing that survives the method initially. So let me try and expose to you guys how far-reaching the method of doubt really is. What's something that we could doubt? I don't know. Take the statement that there's life in outer space. Maybe there is. Maybe there's not. I mean, after all, here we are, and we're. Is there life somewhere else? It's something that I guess you might believe, but you could also doubt. It's not something that you can say you know for sure. In the method of doubt, then, it would advise us to assume it's false, since there's some doubt, and then keep going until you get to something that can't be doubted. Now, that one you might agree and say, okay, that can be doubted. But let me give you an example of something that you probably wouldn't doubt, at least not usually. How about right now, you are watching a lecture, right, on YouTube. At least that's how it seems to be. But could you be wrong about that? Is there any possible way where the thought that you're having, that you're watching this lecture on YouTube live, could somehow be false right now? Like, what would have to be the case? How could you doubt that? How could you doubt that you're watching a lecture on a device right now? How could that be doubted? Is there any way that could be false? Well, think of the method of doubt. It's very extreme, right? If there's any way it could be false, we will assume it is. Is there any way that could be false? Okay, Natalie, very good, that you are in a dream. If you're dreaming right now, which, I would presume that you're not, but, I can't prove it. If you're dreaming right now, then the experience that you think you're having is an illusion, right? Now, we've all had realistic dreams. where in the dream, we think something real is happening. And then we wake up and we recognize, never mind, that was all just a figment of my imagination. And a lot of times those dreams could be very, very realistic. I mean, speaking just for myself, yeah, I have dreams sometimes where all kinds of weird stuff is happening. I'm up teaching a lecture, like we're back on campus, and I'll be like up there in the dream thinking I'm teaching. I see a whole classroom, and all of a sudden in the dream state, I'm forgetting my train of thought, and I start getting a little nervous as I'm in front of all the students, like, oh no, where are my notes? And I can't find them, and I'm like, this is embarrassing. Then I wake up from the dream, and I'm like, okay, good, I get another chance to do it the right way. That was not even really happening. And even worse situations, like I've had dreams where I'm falling off a cliff or something, I accidentally took a wrong turn while driving, and now I'm like facing my death, and then I realize, okay, this is just a dream. I wake up and I'm still alive. So I know that right now you believe you're not asleep, and this is just, you're awake and you're watching a lecture. And of course that would be your default assumption. But if this was just a very, very realistic dream, or as you're suggesting, Jamie, simulation, then it would be possible for you to have this current experience that you're having, and even right now to be asleep in bed, or in the Matrix, or in some kind of computer simulation, like an Elon Musk type scenario. So with the method of doubt, almost everything can be doubted. What do you think is the one and only thing that can't be doubted according to the method of doubt? We're just talking a little bit about Descartes for a minute, so I thought I would help you learn a little bit about him. There's one thing that he says that even the method of doubt cannot touch. But it's something you got to think about for a minute. What do you think is one thing that can't be doubted? And it's not that, it's not anything about the external world, because the whole thing could all just be a dream. You might think, well, I've had dreams and then I've been awake and I know the difference. But if your whole entire existence to this point has just been dreams within dreams and you've never been awake, then you have nothing to compare it with. Okay, good. Now I asked the question, what's the one thing certain? Jamie, you say yourself. Natalie, you say ourselves, our ability to think. Very, very good. Okay, that's exactly right on the right track. The one and only thing he says that can't be doubted, at least by each individual person, is that individual's existence. So make it personal right now. Can you doubt that you exist right now at this point in time? Of course not. Why is it not possible for you to doubt your existence? It's kind of like a little bit of a logical trick. How is it, in a way, a contradiction to doubt that you exist? Why is it illogical or inconceivable to doubt that you exist? How is that not possible? You mean solipsism? I'll talk to you about it in a minute, Matthew, but I'm asking this question. Well, Jamie, you say, because if we were thinking about our existence, we have to exist to even doubt. Perfect, exactly. That's what Descartes says. He says, look, if everything's a dream, maybe you don't even know that you have a body. Maybe the body that you think that you see when you look in the mirror is just the illusion of a body that's formed by the actual thing you are, which is like some cloud of gas, or like a supernatural ghost just dreaming that you have a body. But whether you're dreaming or awake, okay, whether you're dreaming or whether you're awake, that has to be a dreamer who's having the dream, right? So you must have some mode of existence, whether it is disembodied, whether it's embodied, or something, because the very fact that you're conscious, it proves the fact that you do exist. Like doubting your existence is a catch-22. It's a contradiction. If you doubt something, then there's a doubter doubting. So you can't doubt your own existence. That's the basis of a famous quote from Descartes. Now, one thing that's interesting about like famous philosophers or philosophy quotes is that sometimes a few of these will escape out from the academy into the pop culture and into our consciousness, even without us knowing that it came from philosophy. So has any of you ever heard this quote from Descartes? It's probably his most notable quotable quote. The quote is that, I think, do you guys know how this quote ends? I think, and then something, something, something. Do you know this quote of Descartes? And it's exactly relevant to what we're saying here. I think, therefore I am. Exactly, Kelly. Correct. And also correct, Hannah, and to the others. I think, therefore I am. You've heard that somewhere. Where's that from? That's from Descartes. That's from his meditations. It's because he recognizes this point. He says, I'm using the method of doubt on a quest for certainty. I want to set aside all the things that could be doubted, and we'll just pretend, for the sake of discussion, they're false. And we'll see what's left over when I use this method. Well, finally, he gets to the point that he realizes, well, I can't doubt that I exist. I mean, there's no way to doubt that because I'm thinking in the first place. Whether I'm dreaming, whether I'm not dreaming, I know I exist in some sense. So that's this quote, I think, therefore I am. And it's kind of like an argument. What's the premise? I'm thinking. Therefore, the conclusion is that I exist. So since you're thinking, it cannot be false that you exist. He wrote this in Latin originally, even though he's French, because back then Latin was considered like the academic language for a lot of publications. And if you trace this back to the Latin phrase, the Latin is cogito ergo sum. Cogito ergo sum is just the Latin translation of I think, therefore I am. So like cogito is Latin for consciousness. We talked about cognitive development, the development of one's mind over their life. And cognitive and cognition come from the derived Latin root of cogito. Now ergo, as I think we've even discussed, is one of the conclusion indicator words from Latin. So it's very old-fashioned, but it does mean therefore. So this just means thought or mental activity. Therefore, the word sum from Latin, sum, means reality or to exist. So since I think, therefore I know I exist. I wonder if you had trouble sleeping at night. Well, Jamie, let me say this. If you ever do study the whole textbook of the Meditations, which maybe someday you will for your own interest or in another philosophy class, you get a lot more of the full depth of everything going on in that book. And I'm just scratching the surface here with you, giving you the big picture. If you read the book, by the time it's over, he comes back on a big, long, winding loop back to everyday common sense. So like at the end of the book, he's now going to say, in conclusion, I now can say confidently that there is an external world, that the things around me really do exist, and that there are other minds all around me. So basically, reality is as it appears to be. But he doesn't help himself to those assumptions casually at the beginning of the book. He takes a very slow and long trip towards that conclusion, starting with absolutely nothing, starting with just the knowledge that I myself exist. And he uses that as his leverage to slowly, gradually build back up to our everyday conception. So Jamie, I mean, I know it might sound like he's just doubting everything. Is the world even real? I don't even know if it's real. That's where it starts. But it ends with him returning back to our common conceptions of the world. It's just that at the end he says, now I think I've proven it, instead of just having always assumed it, you know? Last thing about the Descartes Meditations book and this concept of I think, therefore I am. Whose existence is known for sure by the meditator, by the individual? Who is it that you can say for certain definitely exists? Who and who alone is the one that you know exists? Based on the method of doubt, anyway. Can you answer that one? Whose existence do you know is for sure? No, not that one, Jamie. Yourself, exactly, guys. Yourself. You know of your own existence. Now let me ask you kind of a trippy question, maybe. Do you know that I exist? How about me, Professor Foolish? Are you sure that I exist? Is that certain? According to the method of doubt. I mean, I know you in real life you don't doubt it. But according to the method of doubt, is the existence of this other person named Foolish, is that certain? And you guys are saying no. Okay, good. So how come you know you exist but not me? What's the difference? Because that's what he is saying. You only really know, at least at the beginning, for sure that you exist. Yeah, well, exactly. So you have your own individual consciousness, right? And whose consciousness do you have first-person access to? Like, you're the first person. Just your own. To all other individuals in the whole world besides you, they're third persons. You're another person compared to them. So their consciousness is something that you can only observe from the outside perspective looking in. Your own consciousness is the one and only example of consciousness that you have first-person available access to. So your own consciousness, you can definitely conclude exists. But the existence of all the other people could just be an aspect of what you're dreaming or whatever, right? Now, you've had dreams where there are other people in the dreams, right? And when you have those dreams, those other people don't really exist. Those are figments of your imagination. So I guess right now it's at least conceivable that me, who am I? I'm just some kind of phantasm that you're imagining. And in reality, you're the only one that exists, dreaming everything else around you. Now, that's not something that I believe, that you believe, that really anybody believes, but it's something that cannot be conclusively disproven just based on your subjective experience of being a conscious individual. And like I tell you, Jamie and others, don't get too thrown by this into the wilderness thinking, what, reality maybe isn't real, now it's all just a big computer simulation. No one's suggesting that. The thing that he's doing is trying to show that you can't necessarily set those doubts aside, at least initially, and that you have to kind of slowly and steadily make arguments that give reasons to think that there really is this reality that we take to exist. Okay, so we don't have the ability to look at the world from a second or third person perspective. You never left the plane. Which plane, Matthew? I'm trying to think which one it was. I don't remember the reference to the plane, but maybe you'll make a note and let me know. So anyway, yeah, little detour into the world of Descartes. Always fascinating. And if you take another philosophy class with more in-depth discussion of him, you'll get a lot more of the details there. Yeah, no, he was just curious about it. I mean, I could give you like a very brief description. He says, once I know I exist, the next step is, well, I know I'm thinking of stuff, and one of the things I'm thinking about is God, and he thinks that he can then prove God exists, because he says, if I even have the idea of him, that has to come from somewhere, and it can't come from something unless it's infinite, because it's the idea of something infinite. So once he gets that on the table, there must be a God. That's his real leverage. He says, well, if God exists, he's too good to just be tricking me all the time. So he's not going to make the world a big dream or an illusion. That would be messed up. God is too nice for that. So since he exists, and I know that because I'm thinking of him, now I can get this guarantee that all the things that seem really clear to me are really true. Because if they weren't, it would be God messing with you, which he would never do. It's a weird argument, kind of, but there are critics of the argument too. There's objections all around. So someday maybe you'll read more about it. Okay. So I just had a couple more of these qualities of a good critical thinker to add to finish that list off. Another one is creative problem solving. Yeah, so creative problem solving is just the ability to come up with creative solutions or imaginative solutions to complex problems. Okay, so good critical thinkers, to go with all those other features we mentioned, analytical skills, research skills, flexibility, open-minded skepticism, method of doubt. There's creative problem solving. So it's kind of self-explanatory based on the name, but I will try to explain anyway. It's the ability to come up with sometimes improvised solutions or creative, imaginative solutions to the problems that arise within life. Unfortunately, even to the most lucky of us or to the most fortunate of us, problems arise. It's not always smooth sailing in life. And when a problem happens, we need to get some kind of solution, or else we have to deal with the problem for a longer time period, or maybe we can't get past it. So we would like to be the kind of people who have solutions to the problems that do arise. Now, sometimes that means that you have to think quickly, like think on your feet and improvise a solution because you could not have anticipated the problem that shows itself. Like all of a sudden, someone's drowning at like a shallow pond where you and some other people are camping, and you didn't think that was possible perhaps because it just seems like so safe, but now that it's happening, you have to quickly assess the situation, see what the factors are, what the best possible strategy to solve this problem and get the person returned to their safety, right? So good critical thinkers don't just panic or become overwhelmed when a problem happens. They're able to quickly assess, determine what needs to be done to solve the problem, and take effective steps towards fixing the situation. Another aspect of being a good creative problem solver is not necessarily always waiting until the problem develops before you come up with a solution. Good creative problem solvers oftentimes engage in what is called contingency planning. They think in advance, well, what could go wrong? They don't just, cheerfully assume nothing will ever go wrong and I'll deal with it if a problem arises. I'll cross that bridge when I get there, as they say. No, instead they think, well, if I get to that bridge, what would I do? And so they've got their plan A in place, but they're aware of ways that it could fail, and if it does, they're already ready to go with plan B, plan C. So the good critical thinker is usually ready at hand with a solution to a problem because they've already thought in advance of what could happen. So you're taking a big cross-country trip. Instead of waiting for like a mechanical problem or for you to run out of oil, they've already got like an extra gas can and oil can and like a little repair kit in the car in case that needs to be deployed on the long journey. It's just the difference between preparing in advance for the problems that could arise and being ready to deal with them, and finding yourself flat-footed and unprepared when such things happen. Now, there's a couple examples that are mentioned in the textbook of what kind of harms can arise when people are not good creative problem solvers. So this book, this is from edition 2017. There's obviously been some more recent examples of failures of planning. Like, I mean, the whole pandemic that we're in right now, it definitely was something that specialized teams of researchers and scientists knew could have happened, and that we had entire emergency action plans in place for, but we didn't necessarily fully fund them or properly staff them. And so we find ourselves now in this situation where, although there are definitely correct steps that could be taken and that have been taken in many countries around the world, we kind of missed our opportunity in a way to have a better and more effective first response. So if we had thought before that if these events happen, what exact steps will we take and been ready to do them, then maybe we could have avoided the worst case type scenario we're unfortunately seeing here right now. In other cases that are mentioned in the book, they talk about like the Fukushima nuclear reactor meltdown in Japan. So if you know a little bit about Japan, it's a part of the world where there definitely have been tsunami waves that have struck the country over the centuries, and that's memorialized in a lot of classical Japanese art. Woodblock prints and stuff show giant waves crashing up against the shore and tossing boats into the ocean. So it's certainly something that everyone knew could have happened. Now, when these nuclear reactors were developed, they were putting them in a part of the country that is somewhere near to the shore. So you would have thought it's conceivable that if there is a significant tsunami event, it could breach the walls of the compound and cause a nuclear reactor to melt down. But even though that was something foreseeable, the proper planning was not engaged in, and when there was inevitably a tsunami wave and it did breach the walls, it caused the nuclear reactor to melt down, and now you have like a 50-mile uninhabitable zone all around where the reactor was that only like robots can go in there to try and clean up and dismantle. So we have a worse problem perhaps because we weren't prepared in advance for the possibility of this happening. Another case a little closer to home that's mentioned in the book is the Hurricane Katrina disaster of 2005 or 6. There were a lot of documents that had been put forward in public policy circles and engineering circles saying that the levees that were holding water back were compromised and could easily break down in case there was a significant hurricane or weather event. And of course that's what happened, thus resulting in massive loss of life and property damage. So creative problem solving is important in everyday life, little problems that we face, all the way up to the big life and death matters that we face individually and collectively. So it's always to your best advantage to be a good creative problem solver. Think about the problems that could happen. Don't just try and insulate yourself from the awareness of them because maybe it's not so pleasant to think about all the ways things could go wrong, because you do want to be prepared, right? Okay, so then one more of the qualities of a good critical thinker, and then we have the next part of chapter 1 to talk about. There's also collaborative learning. So collaborative learning is just the ability to work well with others to come up with shared solutions to common problems, okay? So this quality is all just about working in a spirit of cooperation and collaboration with other people in your network. A good critical thinker does take the best advice, contributions, and input from their friends, colleagues, and peers with whom they interact. So in this world, we have problems that we have to share together by working cooperatively. Good critical thinkers don't just try to do everything unilaterally. and just ignore the input that other people can give them. Now, sometimes we may think of ourselves as, if we have a high opinion of yourself, you're going to say, well, I'm the smartest person in this group. I'm the smartest person in the room. So, if I collaborate and work with other people, all they're going to do is just detract from the quality of my own thought or my own judgment. So some people have, that view of themselves. But here's the thing. Even if you are the smartest person in the room, and you very well could be, even if you are, though, there are sometimes things that you can't see or that you cannot understand from your own experiences in life. So you're always going to be a little bit better off by at least hearing out and taking on the best advice, input, and contributions from your fellow human beings that are in your network. That should make, I think, some clear sense. Let me read a bit from the book on this to give you even more context. So, so it says, critical thinking occurs in a real-life context. We are not isolated individuals, we're interconnected beings. As critical thinkers, we need to move beyond the traditional detached approach to thinking and develop a more collaborative approach that is grounded in shared dialogue and community. The failure to take into account context and relationships can lead to faulty decisions that we may later regret. An example of this type of faulty reasoning is the tendency of many individuals to neglect feedback and complexity. Because of this, they tend not to fully and accurately consider the other side's response. Say in a relationship, we may do something in an attempt to get our partner to pay more attention to us. For example, threatening to leave them if they don't stop spending so much time with friends, only to see that backfire, losing the relationship altogether because we fail to consider how the other person might act. To use another example, military planners in developing strategies sometimes fail to consider what the enemy might do in return to minimize the effectiveness of these strategies. So you basically have to take measure of what other people think, feel, and judge on any of the questions or problems that we face collectively. Cooperation is best. We, as human beings, are social animals. A lot of times people think about the individualism that we all cherish, and that's, of course, important. But we could never have achieved all the great towering achievements that humanity has unless we worked as human beings in societies and collectives. So we are, among all animals, perhaps the most social animal because, like bees can make a beehive. Okay. Maybe beavers can construct a dam. But it takes human beings with our kind of intellect and our form of sociality to construct like a computer or a space shuttle, or all the other limitless achievements of human industry and technology. So we develop medicines together, we develop highways together, we develop weapons systems, we develop all forms of technological communication interface and computing of all kinds. Those things cannot be done by hunter-gatherers working for themselves just to feed their family. Those things can only be done in large collectives and through cooperation. So we should never be blind or shut our eyes to the value and the deep importance of working well as human beings in groups. Okay, now, after that, the textbook talks a little bit about what are some of the benefits that can come from being a good critical thinker. And some of it, I guess, would be, apparent or obvious from the discussions. But we want to at least highlight a couple of them specifically. So I've got 3 of them from the book that I thought were most important. So now the heading of this part of our notes is benefits of being a good critical thinker. What's in it for me? How can I be better off, or how will it benefit me to be a good critical thinker? So I'm going to put what the stated benefits are, and we're just going to kind of have a more discussion of them rather than like a detailed definition, because the definition itself would be too broad in scope. So, okay, one of the benefits is personal confidence and self-esteem. All right, so there's actually some scientific studies that give empirical evidence that correlated with higher levels of cognitive function and critical thinking ability are lower levels of depression, rage, and higher self-esteem. So why do you think that would be the case? What is it about being a good critical thinker, the kind of person who can carefully weigh arguments and can make reasonable judgments based on evidence? What is it about being that sort of person that would make someone feel a little bit more self-assured and confident in life? Why? Why do you think a person may feel more self-esteem and confidence if they know that they're a good critical thinker, the sort of person who doesn't just believe things for no good reason and who makes decisions and takes actions based on carefully decided reasons? What is it about that type of person that gives them confidence, you think? If a person's a good critical thinker, how come they're not just always insecure, full of self-doubt? Why does it tend in the other direction, to make a person feel better about themselves and have more confidence about what they're doing in life? Why? Why do you think that would be true? Just a question. Good critical thinkers of the world have more confidence. They have more self-esteem. Why, though? Why would that be true? Can you think of a reason for that? Just to see what you have in mind. They won't believe the things other people tell them. Well, yeah, sure. They might feel like as though they're not easily tricked or fooled or deceived. So if there's like, I don't know, bad consumer goods in the marketplace based on a really weak and irrational sales pitch, they know they're not the kind of person who's going to be burdened with an unwise consumer purchase. So that's one aspect of not just believing things that other people tell them. But anyone else have some thoughts? We can expand on this. I mean, it's ripe for discussion, Matteo, because they won't have to depend on anyone else for their own beliefs. True enough, but you guys both, Natalie and Matteo, you're emphasizing one aspect of it that I didn't come first to mind, in my mind, that they feel like they don't have to deal with others, they don't have to talk to them, like they feel like they're self-contained and independent. That's part of it. Nicholas, they can't believe certain things people tell them because they don't know them. Well, it's not so much about knowing the person, right? I mean, you can know a person, not know a person. If they have a good argument, that's all that matters. It could be your best friend but have no argument. That means they're not worthy of believing them. They could be a total stranger, but they have a good argument. Then you should believe them. It's not about how you know them, but even though when you know somebody, probably you've vetted the quality of their arguments, if that's part of the reason you've formed friendships. Melissa, they're able to validate themselves. Good. Alejandra, they can prove their arguments to be true. Hannah, they're focusing on bigger issues and maybe are focusing less on themselves. Okay, I like all those suggestions. Let me just try to bring them together a bit. Good critical thinkers know that when the problems arise in life, that they're going to be an effective decision maker and problem solver for their own sake. When you find yourself in a tricky situation, things didn't go according to plan, or you don't like the situation you are in. If you're not a very good critical thinker, you start wondering, who can help me? Let me call my smart, wise, reasonable friend and get their advice. You know, if you're not a good critical thinker, you're always seeking elsewhere to find the kind of guidance that you need to help you make decisions. A bad critical thinker can easily feel overwhelmed, even at small decisions and little problems. So how much worse it is, therefore, when they have big decisions and real significant problems that they do have to manage. A good critical thinker, though, is the kind of person who receives that call instead of making it. So wouldn't you rather be the sort of person on whom everyone else relies? The kind of person who people go to when they need sound judgment or reasonable consideration of facts. A good critical thinker, therefore, knows that they can rely on their own powers of judgment to solve the problems that they're going to face. And it gives you a little confidence, right? You never feel like you're at a loss. You feel like, well, if something comes up, I know I'm one of the people who can deal with it because I'm a good critical thinker who makes wise decisions based on facts and evidence and good judgment. So yes, it does conduce to more self-esteem for those reasons. Jamie, you say people would want to be around them more since they don't create a lot of arguments, since they're open-minded. Well, Jamie, no. Creating arguments is what you should be doing. Arguments are good things. I think I've tried to teach you that. Arguments are just trying to defend a conclusion based on premises. You should not ever seek to avoid arguments with people. You need to press your case to people and show that your claims are true. So this whole thought of like, let's not argue with each other, that's not critical. We would never argue at all if we all just ignored what other people are saying or doing. But we can't do that because we have to act in this world and we have to make good actions. Otherwise, we end up with bad outcomes. So it's not just all, let's just get along, but fights, better term, right? Okay, so that's one of the benefits. And in the book, it says this. to the point of self-esteem, effective critical thinking skills appear to be positively correlated to healthy self-esteem. Healthy self-esteem emerges from effectiveness in problem solving and success in achieving our goals in life. The task of sorting out genuine self-worth from a false sense of self-esteem requires critical thinking. Healthy self-esteem is not the same as arrogant pride, or always putting one's own interests first, nor are people with proper self-esteem habitually self-sacrificing. People with low self-esteem are more vulnerable to manipulation by others. They experience more depression, anxiety, fatigue, nightmares, withdrawal, nervous laughter, body aches, and emotional tension. Some of these traits were seen in the Milgram study, such as nervous laughter and anxiety in the participants who complied with the authority figure. Good critical thinking skills are essential in exercising your autonomy, your individual self-government. Critical thinkers are proactive. They're aware of the influences on their lives, including family, culture, television, and friends. They can build on the positive influences and overcome the negative ones, rather than be carried through life and blaming others if their decisions turn out poorly. So they're both rational and self-directing, and therefore less likely to be taken in by poor reasoning or contradictions in his own or others' reasoning. Okay. Now, another quality that a good critical thinker will typically have is to develop a rational plan of life. Developing a rational life plan. Okay, so each one of us is living a human life. And I would argue probably it's evident that each one of us wants our own life at least to go well. I don't think there's anybody who says of their own life, oh, who cares? It could go well, it could go bad, I don't care how it goes, any which way is fine. I mean, most of us would not be neutral on that question. How do you want your life to go? You want it to go well. You want it to be as good as it possibly could be. It's your life, it's all you've got, so you want to live a good life. You want to have a healthy, happy, successful life. But that requires that you're going to have to make plans to get to those successful outcomes, right? If you don't plan for something, it's not so likely that it's going to happen, right? Like, you're not going to find yourself on the stage one day graduating from college and just say, how did this happen? I didn't plan for any of this. It's only on the basis of a plan that you then execute that you can get to any of the goals that you do have in mind. Now, good critical thinkers are good at planning because they're good at determining what their goals are, and they're also good at determining what all the little steps are going to have to be to get to those goals and what the most effective means to the execution of the steps are. So not only do they set the big picture goals, but then they can also set all the intermediate benchmarks on the way to that. So like, you may have a goal of being, let's say, rich. If you have that goal, well, we need to have some intermediate goals on the way towards that outcome. Like, if you're going to be rich, maybe you're going to have to get a good career. And if you're going to have to get a good career, maybe you have to determine, maybe you have to graduate college. And if you're planning to graduate college, then you have to plan out which major you're going to take. And then it goes down further and further to the little details of your everyday schedule. Choosing a major, now you're going to have to choose classes to take. And then you're going to have to choose the little details of how you organize your schedule on a given day. So we each are making decisions towards the achievement of plans. Even you guys attending this lecture right now is part of a much bigger plan that you have to successfully complete the course, to graduate this class, to graduate college, and then to get a good job, and going on and on and on. So bad critical thinkers in the world, they just sort of watch stuff happen, and they don't necessarily take much active control over everything. Maybe other people make plans for them, and then they just follow on those other people's plans. But good critical thinkers are self-directing. They can determine what it is that they want in life and what the most effective means are to the achievement of those goals. So if you don't have plans, then how are you going to succeed with the non-existent plans? Okay, so it all starts with a goal. It all starts with a plan. Once you have it in mind and once you know what you'll have to do to achieve it, then you're off and you're making progress towards success. Okay, now the last benefit I'll talk about before we close for today's meeting is being a good citizen in a democracy. This is also from chapter 1. Okay, so about democracy. This is our form of government. And what is it that's distinctive of a democracy? What makes a democracy a democracy? What's the feature that distinguishes it from, like, I don't know, monarchy or the dictatorship or something like that? What makes democracy democracy? what's the definition or essence of a democracy? What do you know about that? The public, the people are heard. Exactly. Heard in what way? Well, specifically through voting. Democracy is a government of, by, for the people. The word democracy itself derives from the Greek demos, meaning people. That's what the word demographics is also derived from. So anyway, democracy is characterized by democratic elections. Elections are the hallmark of democracy because the people give their input through the voting process and the voting procedure as to which elected leaders are going to take power. And in some cases, the voters decide directly on propositions and referenda that have been put on the ballot. Now, we have a big important election coming this year ourselves, so it's something that we can think of in conjunction with this discussion here. Democracy is all about the democratic elections conducted in such a system. That gives the people of the society a direct, or at least indirect, hand in who occupies the positions of our government, and therefore what the outcomes of our legislation will be. If we really didn't like the status quo of a certain set of legislators or laws, then we could, in theory, elect an entirely new slate of legislators on the basis that we want them to approve of different procedures, different priorities, different laws. So if we are given this awesome power as citizens in democracy to vote, we can only really exercise our vote responsibly if we are informed about the issues that we're voting on and then make wise decisions about how to vote. So good critical thinkers will judge the merits of the various candidates' positions and platforms and be capable of making a wise vote that reflects their self-interest based on that knowledge. So the more and better critical thinkers we have in a democracy, the healthier the system is, because the people will vote in a way that's consistent with their self-interest. They cannot easily be manipulated or won over to propaganda, rhetoric, or any other number of anti-democratic mechanisms that can be used to shape public opinion. And that's not just me or the textbook saying that. This is a very time-worn idea in many of our founding fathers' writings and classical documents. So like Thomas Jefferson said, in a republican nation, and he means by republican the classical sense, like a republic. So in a republican nation whose citizens are to be led by reason and persuasion and not by force, the art of reasoning becomes of the first importance. And it's mentioned also that in some systems around the world, there's not democracy. So if you lived in like a totalitarian dictatorship, like if you lived in North Korea or something, you would not be given license to have your individual views, especially if they ran contrary to the status quo of the government or the state. So we should all cherish and really take pride in the fact that we have the privilege of living in a democratic system where our views are given expression and where we can exercise our right to vote. If you lived in a totalitarian dictatorship, you certainly wouldn't be taking a class like this, where they said, if you have your own views, you need to argue for them. And if there's things that you believe in, you have to assemble a political coalition, advance the argument for those things, and try and get them put into the law. In a totalitarian system, if you have any views that go against the orthodoxy of the state, you're going to be arrested, jailed, maybe tortured, killed, imprisoned, or something like that. So we don't live in that kind of system, thankfully. So to honor and show respect for the democratic system we live in, the basis of the correct judgment and the correct information, if we're good critical thinkers, the kind of people who carefully weigh arguments before they act and are able to give arguments to justify their actions and beliefs to other people. Okay, so last thing, long story short, democracy is all about voting. And good people, good critical thinkers are better at making wise decisions about voting because they consider the arguments for and against the way that they are going to vote, and then they vote accordingly. All right, guys, that's everything for today. Now, on Wednesday, like I say, I'm going to finish chapter 1, and then we'll be completely done with it. There's just a couple more notes. There's some discussion after this of obstacles to good critical thinking, like what gets in the way of doing it well. So we're going to talk about that for a lot of the meeting on Wednesday. And then I'll give you guys a description of how to be prepared for the coming quiz next Monday. Also, over the weekend, I'll be done with your guys' first homework assignment, and you can get your score back from me. So everything's going well, and it's all on schedule. But if that's good with you guys, then I'm going to let you go for today. I know we're a little bit over time. Thanks, everyone. There's not another homework just yet. It's going to wait until after the midterm. So your homework number 1 was due today. The quiz, that's next Monday. Then I believe week 7 or 8, we'll look at the date, but there's the midterm. And then after the midterm, that's when the next homework will be assigned to you. Okay, so you're looking forward to the quiz next, and the midterm after that, and then the next homework will be given. All right, everyone. Thanks again so much. Take care, and have a great day, and I'll see you back then on Wednesday. Yeah, thank you. Oops, okay. For real now. Bye-bye.